Welcome, everybody. This is Pre-Deconditioning. This is Doc Yam.
Hey, Teresa Brenneman. If you don't know Teresa, does everybody know Teresa?
Who's Teresa?
She and Brandy Gilmartin have Human Design Coffee Talk. You can catch it on YouTube.
And Instagram.
Teresa also has a podcast. I don't know the name.
It's called the Emoting Podcast.
The Emoting Podcast. And we both feel it's really important that when you invite us to be external authority for you, that you know the lens that we're speaking through. So, I'm Doc Yam. I've been doing human design a long time. I've been in my experiment. I started sleeping solo about 30 years ago, roughly, to give you an idea. Okay. I'm a 4/6 splenic projector, split depth. Okay. I have the 44/26 unconscious 26. I have the 31/7, and it's a unconscious conscious split as well. First lines, both of that. So what you get with me is a transmitter that works when I surrender to your invitation. So you've invited me to come share my wisdom with you. So that turns on that transmission thing. So each of you now are kind of drawing something out of me. The 31/7 for me, I'm a far seer. I call it that. I see patterns in the future for how the tribe can survive. Now, the 44/26 is often looked at as this real material thing, right? Like the 26 is the used car salesman. Keep in mind, Paramahansa Yogananda had the 44/26. Car salesman, I think not. However, Sri Yukteswar sent him here to sell meditation to the United States. So I want to reframe 44/26 for you this way. There is nothing more material than your body. Nothing. Without it, it is the life. If you don't have it, you don't have the life, right? So I've been a healer all my life. So I hope you know what to let go of. Get the new patterns from the future, right? So that the tribe is healthy and survives. So that's the lens. So when I present this material to you, you just keep in mind I have a defined ego. And I'm a very authoritarian 731, so I can sound like very authoritarian. Don't take it personal. Okay?
I don't know how to follow that.
You don't?
Well, I have 7 defined centers. I'm a 2/4 emotional manifesting generator. I have 28/38 struggle. I have emoting, openness. So I have a whole stream of emoting. 11/56, 10/20, 6/59. I think I got it all. So you're getting a lot of definition from me, and I'm very fixed. I have almost every single gate in the solar plexus except for 49. So what Doc and I are going to talk about is absolutely necessary for me to learn about myself more and learn about my emotional process, because I'm mostly unconscious in that center too. So learning to identify different parts of myself and speaking to those parts and being able to see what parts were perhaps stopping me from actually listening to my authority. It's like, even if I could hear it, I wouldn't answer it or I wouldn't follow it. This work has been instrumental in that for me. So it was very cool to meet Doc and see that he's had a similar experience.
Mm. So we professionally and in the human design community have been talking to people who recognize this idea that there are tools outside of human design that can be useful to actually applying your design. Your strategy and authority specifically is what we're going to address, really. And that we each have a different background and a view of how that's shown up. And so what we're going to do is share with you a little bit about where each of us come from in that regard. So you again see the lens that we're looking through. And the problem that we're seeing, that the emotional content, unresolved emotional content of the wounded one, the inner child, family systems is called an exile, how that can really drive the not self. So we're going to talk about that, and then we'll give chart examples so you can understand, and then hopefully some markers so that you can see if that is something that might be having an impact on you. And perhaps if we have a moment to talk about remediation. In other words, how you would deal with that, how it shows up with your chart and so forth. So how did you come to this process? I know we talked, when we first talked, we talked about each other's journey. So you have a different path to it than I do. Would you tell me again?
Yeah, so the way that I got into doing this work was actually starting out with facilitating body work. I was a stretch therapist. I was a Pilates instructor, so I worked a lot with people and experiencing physical pain. So I learned how to do a form of energy medicine that kind of like addressed hidden pains in the body and could be subconscious emotions that are the root cause of those pains. And I quickly learned that I didn't really know how to hold space for people having big things come up, because really what I learned was an assessment and like how to find it, but then not what to do with it. So I'd have people on my massage table just like crying, and I'm like, what do I do now? So of course my channel of curiosity just led me down, I'm a seeker, and I really have fun finding different modalities. I'm also desire motivation, so my mind is very experimental. I like trying different things. And I stumbled upon inner child work, and I realized pretty quickly that my inner child had been driving my bus for a while, as I like to say, and how helpful it was for me personally as somebody also with personal view. And I just figured, why not start sharing this with my clients and see. And then I ended up going to a retreat where it was more of a facilitator training, and I learned how to do it and practiced a bunch, and started just, I'm a second line. I just wing it. I jumped in and just started facilitating with clients, asking my clients if they wanted to try it. And here we are now. So that's the abridged version. Could probably go into more detail. Yeah, what about you?
I'm old. So I started back in the self-help days. What was called self-help. There was no human design back then. I didn't know that. And so I did a lot of work with someone called Pia Melody. Pia Melody really had to do with basically boundaries. Doing boundary work, and the idea of enmeshment and codependency came from PIA. So I did all that work. Interspersed in there, I did a lot of 12-step stuff,
Oh, right.
which I have an addicted personality. I'll get addicted to anything. Yeah. Human design.
Healthy addiction.
Right. And so from there, it evolved into Bradshaw, Carl Jung and the magical child idea, the inner child work. And so this was all my own personal, digging into my shadow self. And then consequently, I did shamanic work for almost 2 decades. Studied with Michael Harner and Sandra Ingerman and a bunch of indigenous people you wouldn't know, and led sweat lodges and did innumerable soul retrievals. Soul retrieval, I began to understand, was very analogous to inner child work. Because what the shamanic model is that if a person experiences trauma, then a part of them will split off to survive that trauma. And then if the person isn't conscious about that, then it will drive the bus, right? And run their life and usually mess it up pretty bad, okay? And so I began to see this correlation between all of my early work from all of these masters in psychology and self-help and shamanic work, because the inner child and the soul fracture were the same thing in my view. So normally in indigenous cultures, and when we lived in small groups tribally, the shaman would recognize this almost immediately and do work within a day or two, and it's back, right?
Right.
And they had a culture that supported that. But today, our trauma goes unaddressed for literally our whole life,
Generations.
right? And it's part of our deepest conditioning, in my view. So what I realized is that I could help people to be their own shaman. And so I have a process called a personal soul retrieval process that I teach people through doing it with me until they can integrate or embody the steps. And they don't need me anymore once they understand the map of the territory. They get stuck every once in a while, give me a call, we do a session, we go on, right? We did a little bit of that work. How was that for you?
I cried and cried and cried some more. Dog has a very healing presence, especially if you have distrust in men, I found, because that was something that came up for me after we did our work together. I was like, that was just very healing to have somebody who's so nurturing and like hold space for me in that way.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I didn't know that.
That's important.
Maybe I just told him, I don't know.
Yeah, that's really very special.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then comes human design into the picture, right? So now I'm noticing that the wounded one resides in the open centers. Now look, let me be really, really upfront with you. I am a source-based, old guard, human design guy. This is not, but I have 7 fifth lines. I have a 43 activated by Venus and a 5th line. So tend to be a little heretical,
Right.
you might know. So what I'm presenting to you is my view. This is not source material. Clear?
Okay.
Okay. I mean, we don't get that clarity out there in whatever's going on in the world.
Right.
Okay. We don't. So, all right. The biggest, there's a hierarchy in the not self stack, and it starts out with the undefined ego, which depending on what data you look at, it's either 63% or 70% of the population. It kind of fluxes a little bit, but almost everybody you run into has an undefined heart center. And Ra characterized this as probably the most devastating not self influence on a being, that it was so painful and so upsetting to them. You could tell that it upset him too, that it was that way. Right? So the way that works usually is that the ego center, when it's not defined, feels like it has no value.
Mm.
Now we're going to go back for a second to Pia Melody, and a person with low self-esteem or low personal value was enmeshed and had boundary issues, right? And or they flipped over to the other side and they got very aggressive with their ego so they could defend this feeling of inadequacy, right? So I began to see that the correlations with human design actually were quite profound. The other one that shows up pretty consistently is undefined G center, because there's no identity. Now that's not true, okay, but that's the way it feels in the the undefined aspect of it, the not self. We clear on that? Right, it's not self. And so that's what most of us bring to human design, is not self. That's how we get here first. We're not living our design. So the part I would like to, and I'll stop with this now, projector babble box is going to stop in a second. By the initial trauma that I see is that we betray ourselves. We do not live as ourselves, so we betray ourselves. Fundamentally, we do not trust ourselves. The trust bond is broken within the deepest part of our being. When we engage in our experiment, we begin to build trust in ourselves again. Ra would put it, love yourself, right? That's really what this whole thing is about, is loving yourself. It sounds like a new age,
Hippie stuff.
right? No, but it's not that. It's really going into the places that we have the deepest areas of lack of self-love. So we take a little something like being a lazy ass projector, right? You're just lazy. So what did I do? I became a fake manifesting generator.
You're funny.
Boy, did I betray the hell out of me. Okay? And so my work, I noticed in human design, was like a soul retrieval because I was repairing the trust bond. And as the fragmented soul piece begins to have trust in me, it returns. It's a soul retrieval. So really, human design, now this is me, is a soul retrieval process where you're becoming whole within your own being. You're bringing back pieces of yourself that have been split off. Right? So that was my journey. That's what brought me here. And that's how we both got here in different ways, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what have you noticed with people and how their inner child gets in the way of their living their design? Or I really want to focus on strategy and authority, because that's really where it's at. I mean, we can get all into the bells and whistles and all the mind candy of substructure and variables and all this stuff. It's so fun, isn't it? But if you're not living your design, if you're not working your strategy and authority, you just go home. And you think I'm kidding, I'm serious. Ross said this so many times, people were just like, don't say strategy and authority one more damn time. But it was always there for a very good reason. If you're not aligned with your strategy and authority, your magnetic monopole does not filter the neutrino string through the crystals so that the substructure frequencies work correctly. You realize this, right? This is, I might not have stated it exactly correctly, but that's the general way that functions. Yeah. So, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I've noticed a lot of things. It really depends on the person's design. But I would say that the not self tends to be the loudest voice, and you can pick up on what somebody's not self or find clues in the chart for that. So, I mean, using myself as an example, completely open ego, completely open head. So my biggest thing is, for my child self, is belonging. And I would betray myself, and even if my authority was loud and clear and I could even sense that, I would still betray myself just to feel like I could belong, or to feel like I could prove my worth and my value. You know, and this came up in all kinds of areas of my life. My job, my family. I'm the only open ego in a whole family of defined egos. And I really would feel that constant sense of I need to prove that I have value. And also get very defensive as a child. One of my child selves is like this little firecracker that is very angry, and my dad had to take my door off when I was little because I kept slamming it. And I mean, I can still feel her at times, and she's very much about like something that's not fair and getting her way when the defined egos won't do what I want them to do. So yeah, there's multiple facets going on, and it's just about getting curious and also not approaching those parts of yourself with any animosity, and just realizing that they exist for a reason and approaching them with love and curiosity. The parts work that I'm technically trained in is voice dialogue, and it's more of an interview process. It's more of just asking questions and not coaching the self until you come out of the part. But while you're in the part, it's more of just approaching yourself with curiosity. And so I found that works really well with myself and the clients that I've worked with.
Yeah, me too. I don't use that dialogue thing.
Voice dialogue, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what that is, but mine is similar. I see it this way. How many of you have children? Okay, so, and the rest of you were then, so you can relate to this, okay. So it's the middle of the night, parents in bed, 2, 2:30, 3 o'clock. You got to get up the next morning and go to work. Here comes your little one. Oh, there's a monster under my bed and I love it. If the parent goes, there's no monsters, that's ridiculous. Go back to bed. I've got to get up in the morning, right? This little one will never go back to sleep. They'll be terrified because logic does not deal with the emotional content. So you pull the little one up. Come on. You're scared. Oh my God. Well, baby, just come on. There's no monsters in here, right? You could hang with me. I'll protect you from the monsters. Now, I don't know about your kids, but my kids, when that emotional content, it goes down, it's like, can I have some orange juice? They're done.
Business as usual.
It's just like, okay, I'm over it. Now,
Just got what I needed.
Yeah, you're right. And at that point, I can say, oh yeah, let's get you some orange juice, and I can take you back, and I'll show you. I used to deal with monsters this way. First we look, no monsters, and Then they'll take that logic, like Teresa was saying. You can't deal with them. How did you put it? You can't deal with them when they're in it? Is that what you said?
Yeah, and you can sense with people, even just in your everyday life, not in a coaching session, but I can sense really easily when somebody's starting to go into a child. They'll kind of be, depending on what their child self is, you'll tell by their body language, they might be more like this, or shut down, or they might start doing childlike things like playing with their feet or bringing their knees in like this, or they'll get really kind of defensive and act. Where does the phrase acting childish come from? It comes from people going into that child self, usually unconsciously.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those physical indicators are real important.
Because then you also know what you're dealing with. Like if you're in an argument with somebody and they're giving you that body language or kind of acting childlike, logic isn't going to work. It's just not. My husband's here. We've had arguments, or not even arguments, but just situations that are intense where I can feel I go into a teenage self or a child self, and I'll just say to him, I can't have this conversation right now because I'm not capable of having the capacity to behave like an adult. So we need to come back to this. I need to go deal with myself, or you can deal with me if you want to. And he's very loving, which is helpful, but it's really helpful to know when you're in those types of situations and you're activated and knowing, oh, I'm not actually in my aware self right now. And there's different phrases for that, like central self, aware self, there's the loving parent, whatever. And oftentimes now I can step in and reparent myself in that moment, being like, okay, you're getting activated, you're getting emotional, what's going on here? It's clearly not this situation, there's just something coming up, and get curious about that. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's where logic isn't going to work. But as soon as the person's back to their aware self, and when you're in a session doing this, I have a process of actually taking you in and out of the self somatically, and you can very clearly tell the difference when someone gets into a part, and then we pull you out of that, ground back into the aware self, and then we can reflect on what happened, but not while you're in it.
So we're there now, so I'm going to go there too, which is the markers. To know when you might be in the presence of the wounded one. Teresa's talking about how she manages herself now, which is, in my view, my perspective of people dealing with this is very mature.
Well, I had a lot of immaturity before that. So. My husband and I have known each other since middle school, so he's been along for the ride for
the whole thing?
For a lot of it.
So, do you have your sainthood certificate?
Yeah, I do say that all the time. He's a saint.
So some of the things Teresa mentioned defensiveness, which really will come from either or black and white thinking. So if you find yourself being very polar and you get stuck on the side and you can't come out of it, that's one indicator. Is, an adult is capable, a healthy adult is capable of holding opposing views at the same time and can do that. If you find yourself not being able to do that, now look, we're putting human design, body graph stuff aside right now, because what we've been observing is that this wounding will override your design expression. That's why we're talking about it. Is sometimes there's pre-work that has to be done to really be able to apply the knowledge, right, and embody it. So, at this moment, we're not talking about types or, active channels or centers or any of that. So just kind of put that over here for a moment and go polarities. One. The one I notice the very most is that people will have emotion out of proportion to event. Somebody, Teresa mentioned, a lot of women have been wounded in different ways by men, okay? And some guy may say to a woman, remark on her physicality somehow, some way, right? And it can be fairly neutral. Wow, you look beautiful in that dress. And all of a sudden she's freaking out and wanting to yell at him. That's out of proportion to event. You see where I'm going with that? Or you're with your partner and they're going, wow, you're looking a little sad. Why are you attacking me like that? It's out of proportion to the event that's occurring. That's the one I see the most, okay? Do you have others you'd like to point to?
I mean, I think because all of our inner childs are very different, I really like the black and white thinking because, children just don't have the maturity to be able to see somebody else's perspective. I would say somatic clues as well. It just depends on the person. But like for me, I start getting really nauseous and I start feeling really like riled up, where it's like this adrenaline is pumping and I can even like feel my heart pounding. So just noticing, what your somatic cues are for when you're in a part and what's coming up. And I've had so many people describe it in so many different ways, or even will talk to me about like colors that they're seeing, or I feel like I'm in a cage right now, or I feel like I need to run, or it's just again about getting curious because it's going to be very unique to you and your life experience, and I think also to your design, but you don't need to know those markers in your design to be able to get curious about that.
Wow, that's really good. I like that. The back to strategy and authority. If you find that, for example, you're a generator and you keep trying to hear your your full body response, either pushing it away or shutting down or closing off, or really rising up and vibrating and moving towards something, or just meh. Ask me again later, not now, right? Mm-hmm. And you can't access that no matter what you do. Or if you try and do it, you have emotion out of proportion to event, then this is a marker that you have an inner character that's in your way. of really using your strategy and authority. One of the cases, I wanted to bring up case study,
Yeah, go for
right?
it.
2-4 generator. She has the 5710, the 5734. She has the open head center. That's me. I'm just the format channel on the bottom right. Somebody help me.
Bottom right,
Oh,
left,
yeah.
92, yeah.
Concentration, focus, right? She has a lot of individuality in her chart besides being a 2-4. She's 3 parts right. And she has an open ego. Anytime I try and help her to hear her to do something, her inner character is terrified. I mean, terrified to the point that she can't sleep. She has trouble breathing. She gets manic, right? Because the inner character thinks if she behaves that way, that she will die. She will have no value if she makes that decision. And if she has no value, she will be nothing. She will disappear. Slowly, as we've dealt with her inner characters and she's gotten more of a handle on that, now she's beginning to be able to feel her sacral response in really low, what would you call it, low value situations. In other words, do you want to go out to eat? There's no risk or low risk or no low emotional content, right? And her husband has a chart very similar to hers, and she doesn't want to be like him. Because he lives his design. He's so aggravating to everybody around him. He has 2946 and a bunch of individuality and an open ego as well, and they're both undefined emotionally. And this guy just is all about himself. I've never seen somebody that doesn't know human design, know nothing about it, live the way he lives. And he just aggravates the hell out of everybody, including her. And her inner child is freaking out all the time and getting between him and her about how they relate. And as we've dealt with her inner characters, that has become better. So that's a case study right there. You had one, wait a minute, do you have, anybody have questions about what I just said or what we've said up to this point? Any, thoughts? No.
You mentioned the hierarchy starting with the ego and then the G center. What would be after that? For
The emotional center.
Because I'm just curious where I would start to look on mine, because I have G, sacral, ego, and emotional defined.
You probably
So-
ego first.
Well, I
That would
have
be
those
the.
all defined though.
Oh, we've all defined.
Yeah, everything else is open though.
So you
I'm
G.
sorry, tell me, yeah, could I?
I think it would be ajna or spleen. I think it's spleen, yeah.
The head and the
So-
spleen.
Having trouble letting go of things that are not healthy for you.
Okay,
And
Could be
trying to answer
relationships.
everybody else's questions.
Yeah, yeah,
makes sense.
yeah. Feeling like you need to be certain. Yeah, I would say the spleen will probably be the loudest for you. I mean, there's a hierarchy, and then there's also like hanging gates, right? And so that's what I look to also, is how many activations do you have in the center? But you're pretty even there with what you got.
Could you go through the hierarchy again? So it would go ego, G center, then.
I think it's actually ego solar plexus.
The way I understand it, it goes ego, solar plexus,
Solar plexus, G center.
head, spleen. And I usually don't go beyond that because people usually don't go beyond that,
You can Google it.
in my
Yeah.
experience.
Hierarchy.
I mean, that's the
Yeah,
most
not
common,
self-hierarchy.
and it's,
Yeah.
yeah. So, was there a question?
I was just wondering the hierarchy. 'cause
Oh,
you
the
just mentioned
hierarchy,
it.
yeah. You know, you can get online and do not so hierarchy, and it'll be everywhere.
Okay.
Yeah, and something that I've noticed too is deconditioning kind of happens in layers, where you'll notice that one center will just be a big theme for you for a while. And with the hierarchy, I wouldn't say it's difficulty in deconditioning, it's more about layers. So it's not that the ego is harder to decondition than the head, it's just that there's more layers and there's more depth there. And I think it's also because of our society, and you know, it seems like there's a lot of factors that go into that. But yeah, you'll just kind of notice, oh, I'm really noticing my open head lately, and having stuff come up around that, wanting to know the answers, wanting to answer questions, whatever. Yeah, and if you have a lot of open centers, your not self is more slippery, where it's a little harder to pin down, I would say. If you don't have, I only have 2 open centers. Mine's very concentrated, so it's very obvious to me and to other people what my openness is. You know, it's not that one of us has it easier or harder. It's just like more spread out when you have more openness.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would second that. That when I've tried to do my deconditioning from my head, it's a mess, and it's already hard enough. If you hadn't noticed, it's not for the weak of heart doing this stuff. And if I let it happen organically, you know, what the next layer that's unfolding, then I have relatively more ease within the process from that. I would say, how many of you have undefined heart centers? Do you know? Okay. So I want to share something with all of you that have that. I don't. I have a defined ego, but I work with a lot of people with undefined heart centers. And I pass this along from Ron. Okay? You have nothing to prove to anyone ever. You get a free pass on proving yourself to anyone. Now, that usually doesn't go very far with people with undefined egos. So I've added my own little twister on there. You have the wisdom to deem and see what is of value to commit to, or to have the will to respond to. You get to see and deem what is of value. In other words, it's not the other way around. So we went that way for a minute. I want to bring it back to inner child for a moment and talk about how to initially possibly deal with it a little bit on your own. If the steps that I use is, if you notice a marker and you notice you're out of balance and you have a sense it might be an inner character, if you can stop and just say, who is this doing this? Most of the time, it's possible for people to get an impression. And this is very important. Age is very important because a 6-year-old is going to behave very differently than a 10-year-old or a 15-year-old. You know, where a 6-year-old won't know much. A 15-year-old is probably going to be flipping you off and telling you to take a hike, right? And that character needs to be dealt with differently. So right away, observe what you're in the middle of, if you can, or in hindsight, and spend a little time seeing if you can get in touch with who that character might be. And then it's always good, if you can, to give them a name, right? The next part of the steps, you know, is part of the process, so it's too long to go into here. But that is a beginning from my soul retrieval process, that you learn to recognize your characters. Now, it took me a while to come on to family systems therapy, which said, oh, you don't have one, you have a whole damn carnival going on in there. And I had an 18-year-old that was upset with a 10-year-old, and there was a conflict inside of myself, and it was just devastating to both of them, right? And when I got where I could help them resolve that, my relationships changed enormously. Really, it was one of the big steps in my process. I had a 10-year-old that had been sexually abused, and an 18-year-old that just wanted to lay anything that walked. Okay? And an 18-year-old is all upset with the 10-year-old because he's afraid of anything that walks. And he's keeping him from getting laid. And it was like the 18-year-old's beating up the 10-year-old over this thing, right? So I had this interaction with this 10-year-old, and he's like, I said, what can I do to help you? And he said, well, don't be doing that thing. And I just started this relationship with this woman. It was all hot and, you know, in the beginning, it's like, oh, good Lord, it's Velcro, right? You just can't keep your hands off each other, and it's just crazy, right? So, and this 10-year-old's freaking out. He said, don't do that. And I'm like, okay. Well, of course, he's not believing me because he doesn't trust me. These parts don't trust us. That's why they're there. So I went to this woman and I said, you know where I am at this moment? I can't do that with you. And she was so sweet and really kind with me. And okay. I went back and told the 10-year-old this. Because as insane as it may seem, these characters do not know when you change. You have to go meet with them and tell them what you've done. Well, that was when that part trusted me completely and reintegrated into my being. When a soul piece returns, it's quite something. Okay? Well, then the 18-year-old's fine.
So what he was saying is when you heal something, basically, or you, let's say, since he had this 10-year-old that didn't want him having sex, he had to go and tell the 10-year-old, hey, just so you know, I told this woman I wouldn't have sex with her. The 10-year-old didn't know. It's the way I like to think about it, it's like a house. You know, it's like all these different parts of you are in a room, and if you're in the living room doing something, they don't know that you had this conversation in the living room, and so you go knock on their door and say, hey, I had this conversation, just so you know.
That's beautiful because it
Wow.
informs the child too that they're not, whatever they're perceiving isn't
Yeah.
gaslighting.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're gaining trust with them. After we did work together, he called me a couple days later and was like, have you checked in with your child yet? I'm like, yeah, I've been checking in every day. But it was helpful knowing that he was on my team as well and curious about my child's self, and it helps you build that trust.
I have a big problem with the whole transparency in my gene keys. Because it was just a lot of stuff. So it's just healing to heal here. I'm getting the correct conditioning from it, basically.
Yeah.
So thank you for sharing that.
Thanks for filling in those blanks. Sometimes I leap and I miss little dots in between, so don't
And there's just a
hesitate
part
to
of me that was
go
like, can you just
connect the dots, will you? I didn't get it. I really like the way you explained that about the different rooms in the house, because bringing them out of that room to where you are or going to them and really talking to them about that is exactly what Teresa was saying. It builds the trust bond. Remember, we talked about the trust bond being the trauma that caused the soul split in the first place, right? It's severed. And how do we build trust with anybody?
So a lot of the stuff comes out relationally.
Exactly.
And I don't know if any of you have ever experienced that, where you maybe are in a healthy relationship for the first time, and all your parts are coming out and saying, wait a minute, this is too good to be true, I don't trust this person. And sometimes there's a healing that happens just by your partner being who they are and being loving and being nurturing. And it doesn't have to be this whole like, oh, I need to do a session with that and da-da-da-da. It's just a natural thing that occurs. But having that awareness while you're in that relationship of like, oh, I have a part that's very untrusting, but this isn't actually what's happening in my reality, but I still have to honor that part.
Especially with the solar plexus.
Of
This
course,
happened
yeah.
to me over the summer, and I did. The moment I had fear, the moment I had any resistance, it fractaled out, and it just completely, I didn't catch it. And it manifested more and more distrust, and actually I hurt them.
Yeah, and then you can have dysfunction in the relationship and the person didn't even do anything, you know? And so that's where Doc's highlighting how important this can be for your relational dynamics. And the way I sense nine-centeredness and being a nine-centered being is it's about relationality. It's about acceptance. It's about trust. And this is why this is such an incredible tool for this, because it gives you, I mean, it gives your mind the awareness of this, you know, which can be helpful. Yeah.
I mean, that's a really good aspect to bring up for where we are on the planet right now.
Yes.
I'm gonna shift a little bit for you, not for long. We started out left, right? Left, right? We started out left, quad left, that's the square on the bottom, the quad left, and then the quad right. We're moving to rightness.
I have an announcement to make.
Yes,
If anyone's
go.
not parked in the driveway, that is, if you're parked along the street, you have to move your car to Frenchies, because the neighbors are calling the cops again, and those cars will be, it's causing a real problem. So this side is fine, but if they're along the street, right now is actually blocking the street. And so if your car is parked here, please move to Frenchies Field. It's Google Frenchies Field. So there's
Okay.
about 8 cars out there, so I think at least
Do you
one
guys
of you-
need to move cars?
Yeah.
Does anybody need to move?
Is that
On this side?
right behind your car?
Yeah, unless it's on the corner. There's one that's CNNR FAE. Needs to move. Yeah, that one's on his file. Yeah, that's a
Frenchie's Field, you said?
Yeah, Frenchie's Field. I'll go there with you. Sorry, please
No,
continue.
no problem. So we're going to rightness. This has to do with seven-centered conversation and nine-centered conversation. So you could look at nine-centered as rightness and seven-centered conversation as leftness. The witness, which is something I'm really working with now, it seems to be emerging in the zeitgeist of our collective consciousness, that the personality crystal and the design crystal can be viewed from witness consciousness. So if I just want to mention this briefly in this space, because a lot of people, this is surfacing where all of a sudden you're realizing there's something of observing both my passenger and my design body at the same time. What is that? What is that? The nine-centered conversation arises from witness consciousness. It arises from the inside out of. The way I experience it is very much like being in a warm water, and the words are like the bubbles that rise up to the surface. And I really don't have anything to do with that. They just emerge from somewhere and go on it. Seven-centered conversation is from up here. And you can notice the difference when people are in this wounded part, because it's very confrontational, it's very divisive, it's I'm better than, it's top dogging, right? It's winners, losers. It's focused, it has to have an end point. This is better than that. That's seven-centered. Nine-centered is more receptive, enveloping, respectful kind of acknowledgement of your position and your position and yours and who you are. Wow, what is that like for you? That's the beauty of being here with you guys, really. It's moving toward nine-centeredness, because we can look at a chart and go, wow, that's amazing. Tell me what that's like. You know, I don't know what that's like. I mean, I know human design, but what's that? Who are you? I want to know what that is, right? So, nine-centeredness. I think what we're providing and pointing to here is that these layers before we get to our strategy and authority, these things that get in the way, are also getting in the way of our Homo sapien intransitus to nine-centered brightness.
Like cognition?
See, we're really, as projectors, how many projectors? Okay. We're being called by our sacred counterparts, the 2034s, to guide them. This is the ascension of the projector time. Okay? And we cannot take them where we cannot go ourselves. To really open ourselves to this witness consciousness that appears between, the way I experience it is it appears between the personality and the design, is it emerges. You know what? I have a hard time hearing you.
Sorry.
So if you could come closer for me, please. I have rock and roll ears.
Sorry, it was interesting. You
Um,
said we cannot take them where?
we haven't been.
It's been a struggle with this one.
That's why it's really important to, if someone hasn't been in their experiment a long time and you're getting guidance from them, you should be very careful about that. Please, be careful. Okay? It's important that somebody's deep in their experiment. They cannot take you where they have not been.
Where they have not been? The 2034s or the projectors? So the 2034s, they can't take you, so that would be the generator. They can't take us where we haven't been, or they can't take
The
we can't take them where
projector as a guide
Yes.
cannot take people where they have not been within themselves.
And there's knowledge, right? And then there's lived experience to back it up. And
There you go.
although human design is very logical and mental, it's mostly teaching us how to enter into experiences correctly. And the way I see it, the human way is the experiential way.
Yes. Yes. Very much so. Does that make sense? What?
Yeah, I just have a bunch of questions because you're right. I mean, this whole summer for me has been 2034s. So it's been like what, I know I'm supposed to cognize what's going on here, but then there's been some blips and glitches and stuff. So I think maybe talking later.
Yeah, let's talk later about that. That's kind of a side
I
sheet.
don't want to drop.
But that's another reason why to be connected to witness consciousness is part of what is emerging and where we're going.
Mhm.
This time we're in is not nearly, we haven't really entered, y'all.
No.
We're on the edge of this thing. We are not in it. You understand?
Yeah.
No, you don't
We're
understand.
preparing.
Nobody understands. Nobody, our minds can't conceive what's going to go on. We can't.
No.
And this inner compass of human design is been given to us as to lead us through this process. Each one of us, right? You have an inner compass. Yeah. So I kind of went sideways for a minute,
Hey.
didn't I?
I like what you're transmitting though. No choice.
Okay. So where were we with inner character work?
The 2034s can't take them where they.
Yeah.
Just checking in with them, you know,
10-year-old
respecting
and
them,
Yes.
naming them,
Yes.
rooms
And
and
naming
talking
them.
with them.
And then was there anything you wanted to add to that?
I just wanted to share maybe like a practical exercise that you can do. And this is very much something that you do with discernment because you might need somebody there with you, but if you feel comfortable doing it yourself, you can use different chairs, and when you sit in a different chair, set the intention to embody a different inner character. So it might be like, okay, I have this character of mine, and also get creative with the character. I mean, I've had clients name their characters all kinds of things. You know, there's plenty of suggestions in all of these systems, but one of my favorites that is actually an episode of my podcast that because I do parts work on my podcast. One of my clients named their character their inner lawyer, and you know, we did kind of a somatic exercise to get them into that part, and then you could see instantly the body language change. They became very serious, their posture changed, but you can just shift into a different chair, and it just kind of helps your brain. You could also just like move over like this into your chair and see. But just really getting into the part and seeing how your body shifts, dropping into your body and being like, okay, when I'm speaking from this part of mine, what does my body feel like? What are the sensations? What colors am I seeing? Or what is in my imagination? And just really getting creative, like letting your imagination run. And, you know, you'll sense your passenger watching this happen, but it's really letting go of control and, you know, not being PC and just letting that part of you say whatever it needs to say and let it be uncensored. And and you can do this journaling, you can do it speaking out loud. That might depend on your design, what your preference is in that way. So I've defined throat, I tend to like to speak. But yeah, it's just a little exercise. I usually have people start with their protector part, because most of the time the protector is kind of standing in front of the child. The child is a more vulnerable part. So the protector is going to be like on guard. It's almost a security guard. And we all have different protectors that'll have different ways of dealing with protecting you. You know, for mine is actually more of a pleaser. So I feel safer when I kind of abdicate and just go with the flow and please people, whereas other people's protectors might be very defensive or very on guard, angry, whatever. And so you kind of have to get to know that protector part first to see what the more vulnerable parts are. Has that been your experience too?
I find that this is such a nuanced work.
Yeah.
I don't run into that as much. I think we work a little differently.
Mm-hmm.
I really enjoy learning from you. Just, yeah, you've added to my toolbox.
Oh, good.
Sure.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes the child self is so prevalent because it feels safe.
Yeah.
And that's kind of that was my experience with you. I immediately felt at ease. I felt safe. I felt disarmed.
Mhm.
So, you know, I didn't have this like on guard feeling with you. But yeah, I think it kind of depends. That's something that comes up a lot in client work is I can just see from the person's body language that we're not going to go anywhere deep in this first session. I have to gain their protector's trust before they will let the child come out.
Nice. Along with that, one of the tools that I've used with people is to write with your left hand. If you're right hand dominant, that's the inner character. Or if you're left hand dominant, you're going to write with your right hand the inner character. And so the adult part of yourself can talk to the inner character, ask them questions, get them to respond. So that's another technology that you might
Thank you for calling it that.
want to.
So how would that look? Would you ask the question and then write with your left hand as the response for that? Or
Yeah, like if you're right-handed, you would go, "Hi, what's your name?" And then your inner character goes, "Fuck off." And you're like, "Okay." Nice to meet you,
That's
fuck
pretty
off.
common.
You know?
When you haven't talked to them in a long time, you know, they've been locked in their bedroom for all these years. You gotta.
What do I want to talk to you for?
Yeah, exactly. What are you doing here?
What the hell?
Yeah.
I had a character that hid behind the couch for the longest time. He would just do that. And that was it. And how I showed up with him was I would just go get in a big overstuffed chair and let him do that. Until he was ready to come tell me whatever he had to say, right? You really can't, in my experience, you can't push this about with your mind. It's a very emotionally based, body-centered kind of work. Yes?
I was just curious, Teresa, if you could say more about when the exile part of you is feeling triggered and when you do notice all of the nervous system things coming up, how, if you could say more on like that, I think you were talking about those questions you ask yourself, like how do you kind of approach, I guess I never know where to start because I know I'm getting activated, but I don't know how to like get space from that exile part or get the information that I need to figure out
What's going on?
what that part needs.
Yeah, I mean, I will say my aware self has gotten a lot stronger from doing this work more.
Okay.
So you'll notice it's easier to shift into that part of yourself.
Yeah.
Much like it's kind of easier to notice the passenger the more you're experimenting with your design. But so at first it was really hard because it's almost like you can't see the forest from the trees when you're in a part. It's almost like being in a trauma response. You know, there's kind of a no choice factor to that. So I would just say be really gentle with yourself and just curiosity is the best thing, but just identifying those markers and seeing if perhaps there's a way that you can pull out for a second into the aware self and be like, okay, I'm getting triggered. What's going on here? What do I need for myself right now? Do I need space from this person? Like, what is my body kind of wanting me to do in this situation that maybe doesn't involve, or maybe even asking for what you need? You know, do you need a hug from the person? Or do you need to go for a walk? And just, I would say, like, what's the most practical thing first? And then you can get more curious because your body is going to let you know what you need. And that's another thing with human design. Like, I feel like politeness kind of starts to go out the window once you start to decondition. And you have to be, like, okay with just walking away from the person because that's where your authority is taking you, or that's where your body is wanting to go, or that's what you need in that moment to address the activation within you. But communication too, if you can be helpful to feel more connected in the relationship. Do you notice it most in relational dynamics?
I just mean like, I guess in myself and then other people, like how can I support them if they're activated too? And if they can't communicate, like
curiosity.
Okay.
Yeah. You know, sometimes people don't want to talk about it. And so it's sometimes just maybe sitting with the person and being like, do we just need to sit here for a moment? Or is there something that you need? Is there something I can do to support you? Do you need to just do something?
Do you need motivation?
I don't know. I'm in preschool, so.
So, Ross said something in the beginning that stuck with me. It's been with me ever since I started this work. When you're sitting with someone, remember the child. The wounded child is sitting there with you. It's their not self. It's the wound. It's their definition didn't bring them in here. Their not self brought them in here. That includes me. I come to the work from these places, right? So the way I approach what Teresa was saying is with the emotion first. Because the child has an emotional content that is not resolved. That's why they're stuck there. It's energy that's balled up and it's not moving. And it's causing this response that's running their life, right? So I can feel something really up on the surface for you. Is that true?
I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Do you feel safe here?
Not really, no.
Not really. Okay. Okay.
I don't know what that is.
You all right? Can I touch?
Yeah.
Can I touch?
And sometimes it's as simple as being like, I
It's
don't
okay.
feel safe.
That's all right.
And you don't have to
Yeah.
force yourself to
No.
do anything.
How about taking a breath? Would you take a breath with me?
I think it's been interesting because the focus with human design, it seems like getting back in your body, but yet everyone is just talking and talking and talking and talking and talking and talking and analyzing and da-da-da. And I'm like, I thought we're all supposed to be in our body here. What's going on?
You have a great point.
So it's just been interesting.
Okay, and I'm going to consider that an invitation. So I would like to take you somewhere. You want to go?
Yeah.
Cool. Get comfortable. Wherever you are, get comfortable. Get on the floor. Get just where you cannot be somewhere with your mind.
It took a long time for me. I have no ajna or head definition to get out of the pressure of that listening without listening to the lyrics and being in the body.
So, the witness consciousness is what we're about to experience. So, here we go. The first thing is, if you're comfortable, close your eyes. Please put your phone down. You're touching something. Feel what you're touching. Feel your feet. Your butt is on something. What's that feel like? Your hands, where are they? Take a deep breath. You are present in your body. Listen. What do you hear? Voices in the other room? Someone coming in the door? Little sounds in the room? Take a deep breath. You are present in your body. Smell. Perhaps you ate something or there's cologne, or you can feel, smell other people, or there's a scent in the room. Take a little breath in your nose. What do you smell? Is it sweet? Is it sour? Is it pleasant? Breathe in and relax out, and you are in your body. Notice your mouth. Do you taste anything? As you notice your awareness coming into your mouth, you might begin to sense more saliva. Just swallow and follow the saliva down into your body. And as it comes to your tummy, take a deep breath. You are in your body. Now gently, slowly open your eyes and gaze around the room and see how many shades of brown you can see. Actually allow your mind to count them, to compare the shades of brown, to notice them. Take a deep breath. You are present in your body. Notice the shift in the energetic in the room. Become aware of your mind wanting to pull you out of this place and return to your body through whichever of those sensory channels most spoke to you. Perhaps you can notice that something is watching your passenger. Here's the 9-center game. The 9-center conversation is waiting for the communication to come from this place. Not this place.
It's any kind of trust. Thank you for pointing that out.
That's good. I feel a lot better.
Do you
Thanks
feel?
for the invitation.
Yeah.
Now you're able to perceive things.
Yeah. I'm curious if there's just like on the topic of parts work, if there's a part of you that gets overwhelmed by a lot of stimulation,
Yeah.
like when you kind of feel into your child self.
I'm also very much in preschool with the human design stuff, so I felt extremely out of my league, and like I can't talk because I don't have the correct
So
vocabulary.
there's judgment.
So I've really felt like an outlet for the whole kind of.
Look at the value that you just gave all of us just by
Thank you.
And I
being yourself.
You
Yeah.
know, I'm so glad to know you. No, that was a challenge last year, but I think the biggest thing is like, what are you getting out of it right now? Not about what you know or don't know or what people might
Yeah,
think
that's
of
why I
you.
thought it was helpful, just like tapping into the body, like the strategy and authority, like
Yes, that's what it's all about.
and like you guys were saying too, people can kind of talk around it, but and I think there's a lot of people who have the intellectual knowledge, but like you said, I've just noticed patterns. There's not people who seem to be practicing the, just, yeah, so that was good, thank you.
So that I just took you through is something that I've been using for a very long time. It's a presence meditation, a 5 senses meditation, a sensory meditation, whatever you want to call it, doesn't matter. Doc's Juju meditation. Please use it. It's really fun. My not self is named Slick.
Nice.
Good name.
Damn. And he's slippery.
Slick.
And when Slick gets out of hand, this is what I do. I get back in my body, right? I bring it back here. And I would just offer you, Mary Ann, read something of one. Revolution of One. Read that. If you've never seen her before and after pictures of that, it's stunning. She went into her experiment this deep. She didn't do anything unless somebody asked her, and she did it out of response. She just stopped doing anything. Maybe that appeals to you. You know, I don't know, but how do you embody your experiment? How do you do that? I don't know. How do you do it? You have to tell
Unique to everybody.
Yeah, right. Different for everybody. I think we're complete.
I feel complete.
What do you guys think? Are we done?
I'm so thankful.
That was lovely.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone.
Oh, I forgot.